Oh, hello there once again, everyone at YouTube. I have been gone for a little bit. I haven't made a video in a few days, and I feel really bad about that. But today I'm bringing you a new review, and that review is not of a movie currently in theaters. This is a review of a new movie that just came out on Netflix, and that movie is The Little Prince. So, without further ado, let's get right to it. So the story of The Little Prince goes something like this. In this world that the world is, everyone has to be very essential to society. There's really little time for any leisure amongst anyone, especially adults in this world. And in this world we get our main character, a little girl who is unnamed. That's just who she is, a little girl. And her overly ambitious mother is trying to get her into this big academy where she can go and she can get a good resume, and then she can learn about what she's going to do for the rest of her life. And her mother installs a plan for her in which she'll work continuously up until she goes into this academy, and they move into this very, very dull neighborhood where all the houses look the same, except for one, and that is the one that lives right next to them, very eccentric, odd-looking house in which an old man lives, only known as the Aviator. And while this little girl's mother is at work, the little girl starts to get enthralled by this Aviator's story of this little prince that he met when he crashed his plane into the desert. And it goes on to create this story about learning about growing up, and that it's not a bad thing to grow up, and so many other big different themes about childhood and adulthood. And honestly, The Little Prince was a great ride. Okay, so where do I start? There's so many things I want to say about the movie, so I'll start with the characters. The role of the little girl was very excellently voiced by, I think her name's Mackenzie Foy or something like that. I can't remember exactly what her name was. In case you don't know who that is, she also played Murph in the movie Interstellar, and she obviously got a lot more time to shine, and she really showed a lot more of her talent in that movie than this, because that was live action and this is just a voice role, you know what I mean? And I actually thought she did a very good job. Rachel McAdams seemed a little phoned in as the mother of this little girl, but that's because she was barely in any of the movie. So it just didn't seem like she gave a convincing performance. Like that, not that she was. She didn't seem like she was a character. She seemed like she was the voice actor. You know what I mean? Jeff Bridges, on the other hand, usually when he phones in most of his performances nowadays, did not on this one. He actually did a very, very good job voicing the Aviator in this movie. He gave probably, in my opinion, the most genuine performance. And he really sold himself as this kind of hoarder, introverted kind of man, closed-off man who really doesn't talk to anyone because he doesn't feel like anyone can have fun except, or like go against the grain unless it's himself. And he really portrayed that fairly well in this movie. Other than that, there wasn't many characters that stood out. James Franco, of course, was fairly good, even though as this fox in The Little Prince story that the Aviator tells, but he barely got any time on screen, so there wasn't much to it. And same thing with Benicio del Toro as the snake. And again, they both did a very good job, but they just didn't have enough time in their actual roles to do much of anything. And other than that, I can't say there were any big standouts in the voice casting. Maybe Albert Brooks as this businessman who does business for the sake of business and profit and nothing else, just to do business. And he was very fine. There's another guy, I think it's the Conceited Man, I think is what his name is. This guy, I don't exactly remember what the character was, but Ricky Gervais plays him, and he actually did a fairly good job, in my opinion, doing that. And I'm not going to tell you who this next person is, but there's another voice actor. Don't look up the cast before you are watching this movie. because you'll spoil it for yourself, but he was very good as this character at the end of the movie, and I honestly thought that he did a very good job. I'm not going to spoil who this person is, but he plays a character. I can't really talk much about this movie without spoiling it. I really don't want you guys to know really anything about this movie before going into it, because I didn't, and I really enjoyed it because of that. Now let's talk about the animation. So this animated movie is mostly in CG modern animation that most studios use nowadays, the 3D CGI animation, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't really mind that too much. But don't go into this thinking that most of this is going to be awesome stop motion, because that is another art style that is used in the film, but it's only used when the aviator is telling his story of the little prince. So that's the only times it's used, and so the majority of this movie is in this 3D animation CG, you know what I mean. And I would say the animation in that category, in that CG, was very subpar, especially when you compare it to like Pixar or Disney nowadays. But I would say it's about as good as if you were to watch The Incredibles right now. It's about as good as that. It looks a little dated, but for the most part I was able to handle it, and I might be over-exaggerating on how it actually looks. But overall, the combination of the two animation styles was what really surprised me, and that was a really bold move by the creators of this movie to mix those two very distinct animation styles. But it worked out fairly fine, and the transition from CG to stop motion was very nice, and I enjoyed that a lot about this movie. So the story of this movie was very good. The first and second act were very nice. I loved how they intertwined the little girl's daily life and her listening to the man's story and seeing the actual story in the stop motion animation was very good. The story was nice. The story of the little prince was really good. And of course, I never read The Little Prince in my life. I didn't even know it existed until I saw like stuff for it in Hot Top, and I was like, what the heck is The Little Prince? So apparently it's based off a very old story like picture book. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a children's book. I would assume so. Made by a guy, I can't remember his name. It was made by a French man back in the 1940s or 50s or something like that. So I didn't know much about the actual story, but learning it through this movie, I was like, I could understand. I was like, oh, I really like this story. I love its message that it's giving off. And then it gets to the ending, and which I realized was the actual ending to the book. And then we go into our Act 3 of this movie. Now, I'm not going to say that Act 3 was bad. If you're looking at it from a pure movie standpoint and just the actual story of the movie, and you're not looking at it from a different perspective entirely, then you're not going to enjoy Act 3. If you think about Act 3 in the mind of this little girl who can't deal with the ending of this book and how ambiguous the ending is, then you're going to enjoy the ending just a bit more. And when I think about that, and when I rewatched it, I actually thought about that a lot more towards that Act 3, because Act 3, it seemed like the message was kind of being shoved into your face, and I was like, okay, way to be subtle, movie, my goodness. But overall, by the ending of this movie, I appreciated the ending quite a bit, and once the movie was over, I actually really enjoyed Act 3. I was very much enthralled by it, and if you see it in a certain light, then it definitely works fairly well, and I enjoyed it. And if you don't enjoy it, that's you, and that's not me. I honestly did enjoy Act 3, unlike a lot of people that did not enjoy it at all. And of course, that's because of the way the actual book ends, the actual original book ends, and that's probably what made some people mad, like, oh, we didn't need this big this big epic ending to this story, because we already got a good enough ending in the book. But if you see it from this mind of this little girl who needs answers and is willing to make them up for herself, I actually thought that was a very interesting way to see the story of this movie. And I can't get away, guys, reviewing this movie without talking about its amazing soundtrack. It's composed by Hans Zimmer and another fellow composer, and it is amazing. It is brilliant. I have listened to it non-stop for the past, few days. It's amazing. And there's also a few really good single pieces by a singer named, I think her name's Camille is the name of the artist, but she does the main theme for the movie, and a few other songs in between in the movie are put in, and they are really good. They're amazing. I think they were my favorite part of the soundtrack, and I just wasn't expecting the soundtrack to be that good, you know what I mean? I was like, what? Because usually movie soundtracks nowadays aren't exactly amazing, you know. They're usually, of course, like most movie soundtracks, meant to just amplify a scene or make a scene better or stand out a little bit more. The music's really not supposed to stand out, but when it does, you really notice it, and if it's good, then cool. I mean, that's amazing when that happens, and that's what happened in The Little Prince. I really had to commend the soundtrack. It was brilliant. And of course, one of the biggest importances of The Little Prince is its themes. Usually its story, it takes a side seat almost to its themes at points. The themes of, you can grow up, but do you want to grow up to just be a boring adult? Or do you want to grow up and you don't, because you can grow up. It's not a bad thing to grow up. It's just figuring out who you're going to be is the problem. Are you going to, be a boring adult, or are you going to be a child at heart, almost? Or themes like imagination, how important imagination is, and how unimportant it is to be the same as everyone else in the world, and how imagination is what keeps us driven as a species, as human beings. And if imagination didn't exist, then our lives would be so boring, and especially when you consider all our mediums that we partake in. If there was no imagination in any of them, the music industry now, then we wouldn't have as good as movies or games as we do nowadays. And because of that, these different themes in the movie really spoke to me. And especially with me, I'm going to be going off to college in a week now, and that's a big step, and I'm going to start being an adult, basically. So this movie really spoke to me in that instance. I'm growing up, how am I going to start living my life not being at home anymore? And it really did speak to me in that instance, and I really enjoyed the movie because of that, and it really had a lot of charming and nice little touches added on at the end. And it's just a really feel-good movie, guys. I definitely you need to check out The Little Prince now. It's amazing. Its animation's great. The music's fantastic. The characters are very likable, and the story, while a little bit, Act 3, at least not really for me, but for most people, especially if you're not really getting it, then you're going to be a little disappointed. And they really try to shove one major theme down your throat by the end, and it's okay, we got it, movie. Move on, please. Despite that, The Little Prince was an amazing ride. It's a Netflix exclusive, so if you don't have Netflix, you can't watch it. Sorry, unless you pirate it or something. And with that, guys, I have to say, honestly, this is my honest opinion. The Little Prince is pure amazingness. Yeah, The Little Prince was a very, very fun ride, a very great movie. You guys need to check it out right now. So, guys, if you'll notice, I actually gave that movie a higher rating than I gave Zootopia, and that is my honest opinion. I like this movie a lot more than I like Zootopia. And Anyway, I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if anyone would have noticed besides me, though. Anyway, thanks again, guys, so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you like The Little Prince, comment below what you thought about it. Maybe we can start a discussion on the overall messages and themes of this movie. And if you haven't seen The Little Prince, then I'm sorry, go watch it now. I'm sorry, just do it. It's amazing. It's an amazing movie. But guys, I'm gonna have maybe a few more reviews out in the next week, and probably I'm gonna try and start doing them when I'm in college, but I'm not gonna guarantee that I'm going to start doing them right away next week. So just be patient on the reviews. If I don't upload for a week, that's because I'm getting used to my schedule still. So guys, again, thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.